In the heart of London, where ancient traditions meet modern chaos, a single moment can change everything. What happens when three hardened criminals, each with nothing left to lose, decide to target what they believe is just another ceremonial figure in a fancy uniform? What they don't realize is that beneath that red tunic and towering bearskin hat stands a warrior trained in the deadliest combat techniques known to man. This is the true story of how 60 seconds of miscalculation turned three predators into prey, and how one Royal Guard's lightning-fast response became the talk of every security expert, military academy, and street corner in Britain. The criminals thought they were hunting easy prey. They had no idea they were about to face a guardian whose skills had been forged in the fires of elite military training and whose oath to protect went far deeper than the ceremony most tourists witness. Some lessons in life come gently. Others arrive with the force of a thunderbolt. This is one of those thunderbolt moments that reminds us why certain people wear certain uniforms and why respect isn't just given. It's earned through blood, sweat, and an unwavering commitment to duty that most of us can barely comprehend. Sergeant Marcus Thompson stood perfectly still outside Buckingham Palace, his imposing 6'3" frame draped in the iconic red tunic and black trousers of the Queen's Guard. The massive bearskin hat added another foot to his already commanding presence, making him appear like a statue carved from determination itself. Tourists gathered around him in the usual fashion, snapping photos and making jokes, completely unaware that beneath that ceremonial exterior stood one of Britain's most highly trained soldiers. Marcus had earned his position through 15 years of military service that had taken him from the sandy battlefields of Afghanistan to the dense jungles of Sierra Leone. His service record read like an adventure novel written in blood and courage. 3 tours in active combat zones, specialist training in close-quarters combat, advanced tactical response, and hostage rescue operations. He had pulled wounded comrades from burning vehicles, neutralized enemy threats in pitch-black conditions, and once single-handedly held off an ambush for 40 minutes until reinforcements arrived. But none of that showed on his face as he maintained the traditional stoic expression required of his position. His dark eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the crowd with professional precision while appearing to stare straight ahead. Years of military discipline had taught him to observe everything while revealing nothing. He could count the number of people in his immediate vicinity, identify potential escape routes, assess threat levels, and maintain complete situational awareness, all while looking like he was doing absolutely nothing. The morning had started like any other. The changing of the guard ceremony had concluded an hour ago, drawing the usual crowds of international tourists who marveled at the pageantry and tradition. School children pressed their faces against the palace gates. Elderly couples posed for photographs, and tour guides rattled off historical facts in a dozen different languages. The atmosphere was festive, peaceful, exactly what one would expect outside one of the world's most famous residences. Marcus remembered his first day in this position 3 years ago. The transition from active combat duty to ceremonial guard work had been jarring. After years of hypervigilance in war zones, standing motionless for hours while people treated him like a tourist attraction felt strange. But his commanding officer had explained the deeper purpose. Royal Guards weren't just for show. They were the final line of defense for the monarchy, specially chosen veterans whose combat experience made them uniquely qualified to protect what many considered the heart of British tradition and democracy. The selection process had been brutal. Out of 200 applicants, only 12 had made it through the physical requirements, psychological evaluations, and extensive background checks. Marcus had excelled in every category, particularly in the practical combat assessments that tested reaction time, decision-making under pressure, and the ability to neutralize threats while protecting civilians. His instructors had noted his exceptional ability to remain calm in chaotic situations, a skill that would prove invaluable in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Standing guard required a different kind of strength than battlefield combat. Physical endurance was essential, as guards often stood motionless for hours in all weather conditions. Mental discipline was equally important, as the role demanded absolute focus despite constant distractions. Tourists would try everything to get a reaction, making faces, telling jokes, even attempting to physically prod the guards. Marcus had seen colleagues break character after being poked with umbrellas or having ice cream smeared on their uniforms. But Marcus had developed an almost zen-like ability to remain unmoved by such provocations. His mind would drift to his training, reviewing combat techniques and tactical procedures while his body remained statue still. He thought about his grandfather, who had served in the same regiment during World War II, and the stories of courage and duty that had inspired Marcus to pursue military service. These moments of reflection helped pass the time while keeping his mind sharp and ready. The tourists around him today seemed typical enough. A family from Japan posed carefully beside him, their teenage daughter giggling nervously as her parents took photos. An elderly American couple debated whether the guard's rifle was loaded while their grandchildren ran circles around them. A group of university students from Germany discussed the historical significance of uniforms in animated tones, occasionally glancing at Marcus as if expecting him to provide commentary. What Marcus did notice, with the heightened awareness that comes from years of combat experience, were three men who didn't quite fit the usual tourist pattern. They had been lingering in the area for nearly 30 minutes, not taking photos or showing the typical curiosity about the palace architecture. Instead, they seemed to be studying the guard positions, noting the timing of patrols, and having intense, quiet conversations while pretending to consult a map. The first man was tall and lean, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of wiry build that suggested either manual labor or prison yard workouts. His clothes were clean, but worn, and he had the restless energy of someone accustomed to looking over his shoulder. The second was shorter, but broader, with thick arms covered in tattoos that spoke of a hard life and harder choices. His eyes constantly scanned their surroundings with the paranoid vigilance of someone who had learned not to trust anyone. The third man was the most concerning to Marcus. He was older, maybe 45, with the calm demeanor and calculating gaze of someone who had spent years planning and executing schemes. Marcus had encountered enough criminals during his military service to recognize the type. These weren't opportunistic petty thieves or desperate junkies looking for quick cash. They moved with purpose, communicated with subtle gestures, and positioned themselves strategically. Every instinct honed by 15 years of military training told him that these three were preparing for something significant. The older man, who seemed to be the leader, kept checking his watch and glancing at the palace entrances. His companions positioned themselves at different angles, creating what appeared to be a loose triangular formation around Marcus's post. It was the kind of tactical positioning that suggested military or prison experience, and it set every alarm bell ringing in Marcus's mind. As a royal guard, Marcus had been briefed on various threat scenarios. Most security concerns involved peaceful protesters, overzealous tourists, or individuals experiencing mental health crises. Occasionally, there might be concerns about more serious threats, but those typically involved extensive advance intelligence and coordinated security responses. What was unfolding before him wasn't following any of the script from his training manuals. The three men were being subtle, but not subtle enough to fool someone with Marcus's background. The tall one kept reaching into his jacket pocket, feeling for something that created a rectangular bulge consistent with a weapon or tool. The broad one was gradually moving closer to Marcus's position while pretending to read informational plaques. The leader maintained his position, but was clearly coordinating their movements with barely perceptible nods and hand signals. Marcus began running through his options. Protocol required him to maintain his position unless directly threatened, but he could discreetly signal for backup if necessary. However, the palace security response time, even under the best circumstances, would be several minutes. If these men were planning immediate action, Marcus would be on his own for the crucial first moments. His military training kicked into high gear, flooding his system with controlled adrenaline while keeping his external appearance unchanged. He mentally cataloged potential weapons within reach, assessed the positions of nearby civilians who might need protection, and calculated the most effective response tactics for each possible scenario. The ceremonial rifle he carried was indeed loaded, contrary to popular belief, and he was authorized to use it if the situation demanded lethal force. The crowd around him continued their cheerful tourist activities, completely oblivious to the tension building like electricity in the air. Children laughed and played, couples posed for romantic photos, and tour groups gathered for their guides' presentations about royal history. The contrast between their carefree enjoyment and the deadly serious calculation occurring just a few yards away would have been comical under different circumstances. Marcus thought about his family back home in Manchester. His wife, Sarah, who worried every day about his safety despite his reassurances that ceremonial duty was much safer than combat deployment. His 8-year-old daughter, Emma, who proudly told her classmates that her daddy protected the Queen. His elderly parents, who had attended his promotion ceremony and beamed with pride as he took his oath to serve and protect. These thoughts weren't distractions from his professional focus, but rather fuel for it. He had people depending on him to come home safely, but he also had a duty to protect the institution he served and the innocent people who trusted that protection. The weight of responsibility sat comfortably on his shoulders, as it had throughout his military career. The leader of the three men made his decision. Marcus saw it in the subtle shift of his posture, the way his eyes hardened with resolve, and the quick gesture he made to his companions. Whatever they had been planning was about to begin. The tall man's hand moved inside his jacket more definitively this time, while the broad one stepped closer with newfound purpose. Marcus had perhaps 10 seconds before whatever was going to happen would happen. In those final moments of calm before the storm, he felt the familiar sensation of time slowing down that he remembered from combat situations. His breathing remained controlled, his heart rate steady, his mind crystal clear. 15 years of training, 3 combat tours, countless hours of preparation, all condensed into the next few moments that would determine whether he lived up to the trust placed in him. The tourists around him continued their chatter and photo-taking, unaware that they were about to witness something that would be talked about for years to come. The 3 criminals moved into their final positions, confident that they had identified an easy target in what they perceived as a ceremonial soldier playing dress-up for tourists. They had no idea they were about to discover why certain men wore certain uniforms, and why those uniforms command respect that goes far deeper than pageantry and tradition. The attack began exactly as Marcus had anticipated. The tall man made the first move, pulling a knife from his jacket while his broad companion lunged forward to grab Marcus's rifle. The leader hung back slightly, his role clearly to coordinate the assault and watch for security responses. They had probably planned this for weeks, studying guard routines, and believing they had identified the perfect moment to strike. What they hadn't planned for was the explosive reaction of a combat veteran whose reflexes had been honed by years of life-or-death situations. The moment the knife appeared, Marcus's body moved with the fluid precision of someone who had survived more firefights than most soldiers see in entire careers. His ceremonial stillness transformed instantaneously into controlled violence that would have impressed his old drill sergeants. Marcus's first move was to secure his weapon. As the broad man reached for the rifle, Marcus pivoted his entire body, using the weapon's length and weight as both shield and club. The stock of the rifle caught his attacker in the solar plexus with enough force to lift him off his feet. The man's eyes bulged with shock and pain as all the air exploded from his lungs, and he crumpled to the ground, gasping like a landed fish. Simultaneously, Marcus was already moving to address the knife-wielding attacker. Using a technique learned from his close-quarters combat training, he stepped inside the man's reach while bringing his left hand up to control the weapon arm. The tall man had expected to face a stationary target, not someone who moved like a striking snake. Marcus's grip on the attacker's wrist was like a steel trap, immediately cutting off circulation and forcing the man's fingers to open involuntarily. The knife clattered to the pavement as Marcus continued his controlled assault. A sharp knee strike to the man's midsection doubled him over, followed by an elbow strike to the back of his neck that sent him face first into the palace wall. The entire sequence had taken perhaps 3 seconds and left the second attacker unconscious before he fully understood what had happened to him. The leader of the group, who had been hanging back to coordinate the attack, suddenly found himself facing a very different situation than he had anticipated. Instead of 2 companions subduing a helpless guard while he kept watch, he was looking at 2 unconscious men and a very alert, very dangerous soldier who was now focused entirely on him. Marcus's transformation from ceremonial statue to combat operative had been so swift and complete that many of the tourists hadn't yet processed what was happening. Some were still taking photos, assuming this was part of some elaborate performance. Others had begun to realize that something serious was occurring, but their minds were struggling to reconcile the peaceful tourist setting with the sudden explosion of violence. The leader of the criminals had several options, none of them good. He could run, which would mean abandoning his unconscious companions and likely facing pursuit. He could surrender, which would mean certain arrest and probable prison time. Or he could try to continue the attack, despite having just witnessed his 2 partners being neutralized with embarrassing ease. Being the type of man who had survived years of criminal activity by making quick decisions under pressure, he chose to escalate. From his waistband, he pulled a pistol that he had hoped wouldn't be necessary. His plan had been to overwhelm the guard through superior numbers and avoid the complications that weapons charges would add to their eventual sentencing. But circumstances had changed dramatically, and desperate situations called for desperate measures. Marcus saw the weapon appear and felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with facing armed opponents. This was territory he knew well from his combat tours, where split-second decisions often meant the difference between going home or going home in a box. The presence of tourists complicated the tactical situation significantly, but his training had covered similar scenarios extensively. The leader raised his pistol with the shaking hands of someone more accustomed to intimidation than actual gunfights. His intention was probably to threaten Marcus into compliance rather than actually shoot, but in combat situations, intentions matter less than capabilities. A loaded weapon in hostile hands is always treated as an immediate lethal threat, regardless of the holder's supposed plans. Marcus's response was immediate and decisive. He couldn't use his rifle effectively at such close range with civilians nearby, but he didn't need to. Years of hand-to-hand combat training had taught him that most armed criminals are far less dangerous than they appear, especially when facing someone who doesn't show the fear they expect to see. The key to disarming gunmen, his instructors had drilled into him, was speed and confidence. Hesitation gets you killed, while aggressive action often paralyzes opponents who aren't prepared for resistance. Marcus moved toward the gunman rather than away from him, closing distance faster than the man could process and react. Using a technique perfected through countless training repetitions, Marcus grabbed the gun hand while simultaneously striking the man's wrist with his other hand. The impact forced the attacker's fingers to open reflexively, sending the pistol spinning away across the pavement. Before the leader could react to losing his weapon, Marcus had spun him around and applied a chokehold that cut off blood flow to his brain. The man struggled for perhaps 10 seconds before his body went limp. Marcus lowered him gently to the ground, ensuring he would remain unconscious but uninjured. The entire confrontation, from the first knife appearing to the final attacker being subdued, had lasted less than 60 seconds. 3 armed criminals who had planned to overwhelm a single guard were now lying unconscious on the palace grounds. The reaction from the crowd was immediate and varied. Some tourists screamed and ran, finally understanding that they had witnessed a genuine assault rather than a performance. Others stood frozen in shock, their cameras still recording what would soon become viral footage viewed millions of times around the world. Parents grabbed their children protectively while elderly visitors sat down heavily on nearby benches, overwhelmed by the sudden violence. Marcus quickly scanned the area to ensure there were no additional threats, while simultaneously assessing the condition of the three unconscious men. His military medical training told him that all three were breathing normally and showed no signs of serious injury. They would wake up with headaches and bruised egos, but nothing that required emergency medical attention. Palace security arrived within minutes, having been alerted by both the crowd's reaction and Marcus's discreet signal sent during the brief lull between subduing the second and third attackers. The response team found three unconscious criminals, one very calm royal guard, and dozens of witnesses eager to share their accounts of what they had just observed. Detective Inspector Sarah Mills, who had been investigating the three suspects for weeks in connection with a series of armed robberies, arrived shortly after the initial security response. She had been tracking their activities and suspected they were planning something significant, but hadn't anticipated they would be bold enough to target palace security directly. The three men were well known to London's criminal justice system. The leader, identified as Thomas Bradley, had served 2 previous sentences for armed robbery and assault. His method typically involved careful surveillance, followed by overwhelming force designed to intimidate victims into compliance. He had never encountered serious resistance, and clearly hadn't prepared his team for that possibility. His tall companion, Michael Stevens, had a record of drug-related offenses and weapons charges dating back to his teenage years. Prison had taught him rudimentary fighting skills, but nothing approaching the level of training that Marcus possessed. The broad man, David Hughes, was the muscle of the group, with convictions for assault and battery that had earned him a reputation for brutality among London's criminal community. Detective Mills interviewed Marcus while crime scene technicians processed evidence, and medical personnel evaluated the unconscious suspects. His account was precise and professional, delivered in the calm tone of someone describing a routine training exercise rather than a life-threatening encounter. Marcus explained that he had noticed the 3 men's suspicious behavior approximately 30 minutes before the attack. Their movements, positioning, and communication patterns had triggered his tactical awareness, prompting him to prepare mentally for possible confrontation while maintaining his ceremonial duties. When the attack began, his response had been based on standard close-quarters combat procedures adapted for the specific circumstances. The detective was impressed by Marcus's situational awareness and professional handling of the incident. His ability to neutralize 3 armed attackers while protecting nearby civilians demonstrated exactly why combat veterans were chosen for Royal Guard positions. The ceremonial aspect of the role might be what the public saw, but the underlying security function required individuals capable of precisely this type of response. Video footage from multiple tourist cameras and palace security systems would later provide a complete record of the incident. Military analysts who reviewed the recordings noted Marcus's textbook execution of close-quarters combat techniques and his excellent tactical decision-making under pressure. The footage became a case study in several military academies as an example of how proper training enables effective response to unexpected threats. Word of the incident spread quickly through both traditional and social media. The story of 3 criminals being instantly defeated by a single royal guard captured public imagination and sparked discussions about the true nature of ceremonial military positions. Many people had assumed that palace guards were primarily for show, unaware of the extensive combat training and active duty experience required for such roles. Marcus's commanding officer, Colonel James Morrison, arrived at the scene to personally debrief his soldier and ensure that proper procedures were followed. The colonel had served alongside Marcus during their deployment in Afghanistan and had recommended him for Royal Guard duty based on his exceptional service record and proven ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. The colonel reviewed the incident with obvious pride in his soldier's performance. Marcus had demonstrated exactly the kind of professional excellence that the Royal Guards were known for, handling a serious security threat with minimal force while protecting both himself and innocent bystanders. His actions reflected years of intensive training and the high standards maintained by one of Britain's most elite military units. Media requests began flooding in within hours of the incident, as news outlets around the world picked up the story of the Royal Guard, who had single-handedly defeated 3 armed attackers. However, Marcus declined all interview requests, preferring to let his actions speak for themselves rather than seek personal publicity from doing his job. The 3 criminals were transported to hospital for medical evaluation before being charged with attempted armed robbery, assault on a police officer, weapons violations, and conspiracy to commit violence on government property. Their lawyers would later argue that their clients had suffered excessive force, but video evidence clearly showed that Marcus had used only the minimum force necessary to neutralize genuine threats. Detective Mills's investigation revealed that the 3 had been planning the attack for several weeks, believing that Royal Guard were easy targets who wouldn't be able to respond effectively to sudden violence. They had studied guard rotations, identified what they perceived as vulnerable positions, and prepared equipment specifically for overpowering ceremonial soldiers. Their fundamental miscalculation had been assuming that ceremonial duties meant ceremonial training. They had no understanding of the military backgrounds required for Royal Guard positions or the continuous tactical training that such soldiers maintained. In their criminal experience, uniforms often indicated limited combat capability, but they had targeted one of the few uniform positions that actually represented elite military training. The aftermath of the incident revealed just how carefully the 3 criminals had planned their assault, and how completely they had misunderstood their target. Detective Inspector Mills spent the following weeks unraveling a conspiracy that extended far beyond a simple robbery attempt. The investigation uncovered a sophisticated criminal network that had been targeting high-profile locations across London, believing that ceremonial guards and security personnel would provide easy opportunities for spectacular crimes. Thomas Bradley, the leader of the group, had been studying Royal Guard routines for over 2 months. His apartment, searched after his arrest, contained detailed notes about shift changes, weapon protocols, and tourist patterns around Buckingham Palace. He had photographed guards from multiple angles, timed their movements, and created elaborate diagrams showing what he believed were vulnerabilities in palace security. The most revealing discovery was Bradley's criminal journal, where he had written extensively about his philosophy of intimidation-based crime. He believed that most security personnel, especially those in ceremonial roles, would surrender immediately when confronted with overwhelming force. His previous successful robberies had reinforced this belief, as his victims had typically been ordinary citizens or lightly trained security guards who had no experience dealing with violent criminals. Bradley's fatal error had been assuming that all uniformed personnel fit this pattern. His research had focused entirely on the visible aspects of Royal Guard duty without investigating the military backgrounds required for such positions. He had observed Marcus standing motionless for hours and concluded that this indicated limited physical capabilities rather than extraordinary discipline and training. Michael Stevens, the tall man with a knife, had a different but equally flawed perspective. His prison experience had taught him that most fights were won through surprise and aggression rather than skill. He had assumed that catching a guard off duty mentally would provide sufficient advantage to overwhelm any training they might possess. His criminal associates had reinforced this belief with stories of successful attacks on various authority figures who had proven less capable than their uniform suggested. Stevens had specifically volunteered to be the primary attacker because he believed his knife skills, learned during several violent altercations in prison, would be more than adequate against someone he viewed as essentially a tourist attraction in military dress. His confidence had been so complete that he hadn't even considered the possibility that his attack might fail, let alone that it might be countered so decisively. David Hughes, the broad man designated as muscle for the operation, had the most straightforward but perhaps most dangerous mindset. His approach to violence was based purely on size and intimidation, having spent years using his physical presence to control situations through fear. He had assumed that grabbing the guard's rifle would immediately shift the power dynamic in their favor, making resistance futile. Hughes had never encountered someone with Marcus's level of training, where every movement had been practiced thousands of times until it became instinctive. His experience with violence had been limited to bar fights and street confrontations against opponents who relied on emotion rather than technique. The precision and speed with which Marcus had neutralized him had been completely outside his frame of reference. The investigation also revealed that the three men had been part of a larger criminal organization that specialized in high-profile robberies designed to generate media attention as well as financial gain. Their leader, a career criminal named Robert Shaw who remained at large, had been selecting targets based on their symbolic value rather than their actual security vulnerabilities. Shaw's philosophy was that spectacular crimes against recognizable institutions would enhance his reputation within London's criminal community while demonstrating his organization's capabilities to potential recruits and rivals. He had specifically chosen ceremonial targets because he believed they offered the best combination of high visibility and low risk. The Royal Guard attack had been intended as a proof of concept for larger operations targeting other ceremonial positions throughout London. Shaw's plans, discovered during raids on several associated properties, included similar assaults on guards of the Tower of London, ceremonial police units, and even military personnel at various memorial sites. Shaw's fundamental miscalculation matched that of his subordinates. He had focused entirely on the ceremonial aspects of these positions without understanding the genuine security functions they served. His research had been thorough regarding schedules and protocols, but completely inadequate regarding the training and capabilities of the personnel involved. Detective Mills found evidence that Shaw had been recruiting additional criminals for his organization by promising them easy targets and spectacular successes. His pitch to potential members emphasized the supposed vulnerability of ceremonial positions and the media attention that successful attacks would generate. Several recorded conversations revealed his contempt for what he called toy soldiers playing dress-up for tourists. The reality of Marcus's response had shattered Shaw's entire operational philosophy. Instead of demonstrating the vulnerability of ceremonial positions, the incident had proven exactly the opposite. Shaw's carefully recruited organization began falling apart as members realized that their leader's intelligence had been fatally flawed. Marcus himself remained largely unaware of these broader implications during the days immediately following the incident. His primary concern was returning to normal duties as quickly as possible, though palace security protocols required extensive debriefing and temporary reassignment while investigations proceeded. The debriefing process involved military psychologists who specialized in combat stress and post-incident analysis. They were particularly interested in Marcus's thought processes during the attack and his emotional state in the aftermath. Combat veterans sometimes experience delayed reactions to violent encounters, even when they had performed flawlessly during the actual events. Marcus's psychological evaluation revealed the mental resilience that had made him successful during his combat deployments. He showed no signs of trauma or excessive stress, describing the incident in the same matter-of-fact tone he might use to discuss a training exercise. His primary emotion appeared to be satisfaction at having successfully protected civilians and upheld his oath of service. The military psychologists noted that Marcus's response pattern was consistent with highly experienced combat veterans who had developed sophisticated coping mechanisms for violent situations. His ability to compartmentalize the incident and return to normal functioning indicated exceptional mental health and professional maturity. However, the broader implications of the attack required significant changes to palace security protocols. The incident had demonstrated that ceremonial positions could indeed be targeted by sophisticated criminal organizations, necessitating enhanced awareness and preparation for similar threats. Marcus found himself temporarily assigned to training duties, where he helped develop new defensive protocols for royal guards and other ceremonial military personnel. His first-hand experience with the attack provided valuable insights into the types of threats that might be encountered and the most effective responses to various assault scenarios. The training programs he helped design became models for ceremonial security units throughout the Commonwealth. His techniques for maintaining situational awareness while performing ceremonial duties were particularly valuable, as they addressed the unique challenge of staying alert for genuine threats while fulfilling traditional ceremonial requirements. During this period, Marcus also worked with intelligence analysts to identify potential indicators of similar planned attacks. His observations of the three criminals' behavior in the minutes before their assault helped create profiles for suspicious activity that could be recognized by guards and security personnel at other locations. The intelligence community was particularly interested in Marcus's description of how the three men had positioned themselves and communicated before the attack. These behavioral patterns became part of training materials used by security services throughout Europe, helping other professionals recognize similar threats before they could develop into actual attacks. Marcus's temporary assignment also included consulting with architectural security specialists who were reviewing the physical layout of ceremonial positions. His combat experience provided insights into how determined attackers might exploit various environmental factors, leading to subtle modifications in guard positions and crowd control measures. The most significant long-term change resulting from the incident was a comprehensive review of selection criteria for ceremonial military positions. While combat experience had always been preferred, it became an absolute requirement for certain high-visibility assignments. The incident had proven that ceremonial duties could indeed involve genuine combat situations requiring the highest levels of military training. This policy change affected military personnel throughout the Commonwealth, as other nations recognized that ceremonial positions required the same caliber of soldiers as active combat roles. The romantic notion of ceremonial duties as peaceful, low-risk assignments was permanently replaced by a more realistic understanding of their security functions. Marcus's colleagues in the Royal Guards welcomed these changes, as they had always understood the serious nature of their duties despite public perceptions. The incident had validated their professional pride and demonstrated to the world that their positions required genuine military excellence rather than just the ability to stand still in ornate uniforms. The three criminals, meanwhile, faced a legal system that took their attack very seriously. The charges against them included terrorism-related offenses due to their targeting of government facilities and the broader conspiracy they had been part of. Their lawyers struggled to develop defense strategies that could account for their clients' complete failure to research their intended target adequately. Bradley's detailed journals actually worked against him during legal proceedings, as they demonstrated premeditation and extensive planning rather than spontaneous criminal behavior. His writings revealed a contemptuous attitude toward military personnel that judges and juries found particularly disturbing given his complete failure to understand the capabilities of the people he had targeted. Stevens faced additional charges related to weapons violations and his prison record, which showed a pattern of escalating violence that concerned prosecutors. His knife attack on a serving soldier was treated as an assault on a government official, carrying enhanced penalties that reflected the seriousness with which such crimes were viewed. Hughes, despite being the least sophisticated member of the group, faced some of the most serious charges due to his attempt to steal a military weapon. His actions could have been interpreted as an attempt to acquire firearms for terrorist purposes, even though his actual intentions had been more limited. The legal proceedings attracted international attention, particularly from security experts who used the case to illustrate the importance of proper threat assessment and the dangers of underestimating trained military personnel. Law enforcement agencies around the world incorporated elements of the case into their training programs, using it to demonstrate how criminal intelligence failures could lead to catastrophic operational results. Public reaction to the incident and subsequent legal proceedings was overwhelmingly supportive of Marcus and critical of the attackers. Social media was filled with praise for his professional response and criticism of criminals who would target ceremonial positions. The incident became a symbol of the dedication and capability of military personnel who serve in highly visible but often misunderstood roles. The international media attention surrounding the incident transformed Marcus from an anonymous ceremonial guard into a global symbol of military professionalism and duty. News outlets from New York to Tokyo featured the story, often focusing on the dramatic contrast between the attackers' expectations and the reality they encountered. The footage of the 60-second confrontation became one of the most watched videos in internet history, viewed hundreds of millions of times across various platforms. Military experts from around the world analyzed the incident frame by frame, using it to illustrate principles of close-quarters combat, situational awareness, and tactical decision-making. The United States Military Academy at West Point incorporated the video into their curriculum as an example of how proper training enables split-second responses to unexpected threats. Similar military institutions in Canada, Australia, and throughout Europe followed suit. Dr. James Patterson, a professor of military strategy at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, wrote extensively about the incident in professional journals. His analysis focused on how Marcus's actions demonstrated the integration of multiple combat disciplines into a coherent response under extreme pressure. Patterson noted that the guard's performance represented years of training crystallized into moments of perfect execution. The academic military community was particularly interested in Marcus's ability to transition instantly from ceremonial stillness to explosive action. This demonstrated a level of mental discipline that most soldiers never achieve, requiring the ability to maintain combat readiness while appearing completely passive. The psychological demands of such positioning had never been fully appreciated until this incident provided such a clear example. Combat psychologists studied Marcus's performance to understand how elite soldiers manage the mental transition from peaceful to violent situations. His ability to assess threats, make tactical decisions, and execute complex physical movements within seconds of recognizing danger represented a level of training that few people could imagine achieving. The incident also sparked broader discussions about the nature of ceremonial military positions and their relationship to actual security functions. Many civilians had assumed that such roles were primarily symbolic, unaware of the genuine protective duties they entailed. The attack and its aftermath educated the public about the serious military capabilities required for positions that appeared purely ceremonial. Marcus found the attention overwhelming and largely unwelcome. His military training had emphasized team accomplishment over individual recognition, and he was uncomfortable being singled out for doing what he considered simply his job. He declined numerous requests for television interviews, book deals, and speaking engagements, preferring to return to his duties as quickly as possible. However, his commanding officers recognized the broader value of his experience and encouraged him to participate in selected training programs and professional development activities. His insights proved invaluable for developing new protocols and training methods that would benefit military personnel throughout the Commonwealth and beyond. One of the most significant developments arising from the incident was the creation of enhanced situational awareness training for ceremonial guards. Marcus worked with training specialists to develop programs that taught soldiers how to maintain threat assessment capabilities while fulfilling ceremonial requirements. These programs became standard throughout military forces that maintained ceremonial units. The training emphasized the psychological aspects of maintaining combat readiness during extended periods of apparent inactivity. Soldiers learned meditation techniques, mental exercises, and awareness drills that helped them stay alert for genuine threats while performing ceremonial duties that could last several hours without incident. Marcus's techniques for observing crowds while maintaining ceremonial stillness became particularly valuable training elements. He had developed methods for tracking multiple potential threats simultaneously while appearing to focus straight ahead, skills that proved essential for other guards facing similar challenges. The incident also led to technological improvements in ceremonial security. Communication systems were upgraded to allow guards to signal for assistance more discreetly, and surveillance capabilities around ceremonial positions were enhanced without compromising their traditional appearance. These changes balanced security needs with the historical integrity that made such positions meaningful. Robert Shaw, the criminal mastermind behind the failed attack, remained at large for several months following the incident. His organization had collapsed as members realized that his intelligence and planning capabilities were far less reliable than he had claimed. Several associates provided information to law enforcement in exchange for reduced sentences, gradually building a comprehensive picture of Shaw's operations and methods. Shaw himself became increasingly desperate as his criminal network disintegrated around him. The spectacular failure of the Palace attack had destroyed his reputation within London's criminal community, making it difficult for him to recruit new members or plan additional operations. His previous successes had been based largely on careful target selection rather than superior criminal skills, and the Palace incident had exposed these limitations. Detective Mills continued pursuing Shaw with the assistance of international law enforcement agencies. His methodology of targeting ceremonial positions had attracted attention from security services throughout Europe, as similar criminal organizations in other countries had begun adopting comparable strategies. Shaw's capture became a priority for preventing copycat attacks on ceremonial military positions elsewhere. The investigation revealed that Shaw had been corresponding with criminal organizations in several European countries, sharing his research on ceremonial security vulnerabilities and encouraging similar attacks. His failure at Buckingham Palace had not deterred him from promoting his methods, though his credibility had been severely damaged by the incident. Interpol issued international warrants for Shaw and began coordinating with law enforcement agencies across Europe to prevent his escape and apprehend any associated criminals who might attempt similar attacks. The investigation had grown from a simple assault case into a complex international security operation. Marcus remained largely unaware of these broader implications as he focused on his military duties and the training responsibilities he had been assigned. His primary concern was ensuring that other soldiers could benefit from his experience without having to face similar dangerous situations themselves. The psychological impact of the incident on Marcus was minimal, thanks to his extensive combat experience and strong support network within the military. However, he did experience some frustration with the media attention and public scrutiny that accompanied his newfound fame. His preference was to serve quietly and professionally without external recognition or commentary. His family, particularly his wife Sarah and daughter Emma, found the attention more challenging to manage. They were proud of Marcus's actions, but concerned about the security implications of his increased public profile. The military provided security assessments and guidance to help them manage the changed circumstances while maintaining as normal a life as possible. Sarah had always worried about Marcus's safety during his combat deployments, and the idea that ceremonial duty could involve similar dangers was disturbing to her. However, she also felt pride in his professional excellence and the recognition it had brought to the entire Royal Guards Regiment. Her concerns were balanced by confidence in his training and judgment. Emma, at 8 years old, didn't fully understand the significance of the incident, but enjoyed the attention her father received from classmates and teachers who had seen the news coverage. Her school used the incident as a teaching opportunity about different types of military service and the importance of training and preparation in all professions. The broader military community rallied around Marcus and his family, providing both practical support and professional recognition for his actions. His regiment held a formal ceremony acknowledging his service, though Marcus remained uncomfortable with individual recognition for what he considered team-based military excellence. Colonel Morrison, his commanding officer, noted that Marcus's response had enhanced the reputation of the entire Royal Guards Regiment and brought positive attention to the military's ceremonial functions. The incident had demonstrated to the public that these positions required genuine military excellence rather than just the ability to stand still in impressive uniforms. The long-term career implications for Marcus were entirely positive. His actions had established him as an exemplar of military professionalism and had opened opportunities for advancement and specialized assignments that might not have been available otherwise. However, his immediate preference was to return to normal duties rather than pursue career advancement based on media attention. Military leadership recognized that Marcus's experience made him uniquely qualified for training and development roles that could benefit the entire service. His combination of combat experience, ceremonial duty knowledge, and proven performance under pressure represented capabilities that could enhance military training programs significantly. The incident had also created opportunities for Marcus to contribute to international military cooperation programs. His experience was relevant to ceremonial guard units throughout the Commonwealth and NATO countries, potentially leading to exchange programs and joint training initiatives that would benefit multiple military services. However, Marcus remained focused on his immediate responsibilities and the soldiers under his indirect influence through training programs. His priority was ensuring that other military personnel could perform their duties safely and effectively, whether in ceremonial positions or active combat roles. The criminal justice proceedings against Bradley, Stevens, and Hughes continued through the court system, with their defense attorneys struggling to develop effective strategies given the overwhelming evidence of premeditation and the spectacular failure of their clients' plans. The video evidence of the incident left little room for alternative interpretations of their intentions or actions. Public opinion remained strongly supportive of Marcus and critical of the attackers throughout the legal process. The incident had struck a nerve with people who valued traditional institutions and respected military service, making the criminals highly unsympathetic figures in the court of public opinion. The broader implications of the incident continued to influence military and security policies throughout Europe and the Commonwealth. The lesson that ceremonial positions required genuine military capabilities rather than just symbolic presence had been learned at the cost of 3 criminals' freedom and careers, but without loss of life or serious injury to military personnel or civilians. Marcus's 60 seconds of action had created changes that would influence military training, security protocols, and public understanding of ceremonial military roles for years to come. His professional response to an unexpected threat had become a case study in military excellence that would benefit countless soldiers who would never face similar situations but could learn from his example. 6 months after the incident, Marcus had returned to his regular ceremonial duties, though the experience had changed both him and the nature of his role in subtle but significant ways. The public recognition had eventually subsided, allowing him to serve with the relative anonymity he preferred, but the lessons learned from that 60-second encounter continued to influence military training and security protocols throughout the Commonwealth. The most lasting impact of the incident was the transformation it had brought to public understanding of military ceremonial roles. Tourists visiting Buckingham Palace now looked at the royal guards with a different kind of respect, aware that these were not merely symbolic figures, but highly trained soldiers capable of extraordinary performance under pressure. The romantic notion of ceremonial guards as harmless pageantry had been permanently replaced by accurate recognition of their genuine military capabilities. Marcus noticed this change in public behavior during his daily duties. Tourists were more respectful. Children seemed more aware that he was a real soldier rather than a tourist attraction, and the occasional attempts to provoke reactions from guards had decreased significantly. The incident had educated people about the serious nature of these positions in ways that official explanations never could have achieved. The 3 criminals who had attacked him were serving lengthy prison sentences, their cases having become cautionary tales within both the criminal justice system and the broader criminal community. Bradley, Stevens, and Hughes had discovered that targeting military personnel carried consequences far beyond what they had anticipated, both in terms of immediate physical response and subsequent legal punishment. Bradley's detailed journals and planning materials had become evidence in criminal justice courses, illustrating how inadequate intelligence gathering could lead to catastrophic operational failures. His contemptuous attitude toward military personnel had been contrasted with the reality of their training and capabilities, providing law enforcement students with clear examples of criminal overconfidence and tactical miscalculation. Stevens and Hughes, the two men who had directly engaged Marcus in combat, had suffered both physical defeat and professional humiliation that made them pariahs within the prison system. Other inmates, many of whom had military backgrounds or respected military service, viewed their attack on a ceremonial guard as particularly disgraceful. Their prison experience had been made considerably more difficult by the nature of their crimes and their spectacular failure to achieve any of their objectives. The mastermind behind the operation, Robert Shaw, had finally been captured during a raid on a safe house in Birmingham. His arrest had been the culmination of an international investigation that had revealed the scope of his criminal organization and prevented similar attacks on ceremonial positions throughout Europe. Shaw's capture had effectively ended the threat posed by his network and provided closure for the investigation that had begun with the Palace incident. Detective Mills, who had led the investigation from the beginning, noted that Shaw's criminal philosophy had been fundamentally flawed from the start. His assumption that ceremonial positions represented soft targets had ignored the basic military principle that visible positions often receive the highest levels of protection and are staffed by the most capable personnel available. Shaw's downfall had been his failure to understand that modern military forces don't maintain purely ceremonial positions. Every role, regardless of how traditional or symbolic it might appear, serves genuine security functions and requires personnel capable of fulfilling those functions under the most challenging circumstances. The international law enforcement cooperation that led to Shaw's capture had also uncovered similar criminal organizations in several other countries, leading to arrests and prosecutions that prevented numerous planned attacks on military and government ceremonial positions. Marcus's 60-second response had initiated a chain of events that enhanced security throughout Europe and beyond. Marcus himself remained largely unaware of these broader implications, focusing instead on his immediate responsibilities and the training roles he had been assigned. His experience had made him a valuable resource for military education, but he approached these responsibilities with the same professional dedication he brought to ceremonial duties. The training programs he had helped develop were being implemented throughout Commonwealth military forces, with particular emphasis on the psychological aspects of maintaining combat readiness during extended ceremonial duties. His techniques for threat assessment and situational awareness had become standard training elements for guards at high-profile locations throughout the world. Military academies from Sandhurst to West Point had incorporated analysis of his performance into their curricula, using it to illustrate principles of combat psychology, tactical decision-making, and the integration of training into instinctive response patterns. His actions have become a textbook example of how proper preparation enables exceptional performance under extreme pressure. Dr. Patterson, the military strategy professor who had written extensively about the incident, continued to use it in his research on combat psychology and military training effectiveness. His work had contributed to improved understanding of how elite soldiers manage the transition from peaceful to violent situations, leading to enhanced training methods throughout military education systems. The technological improvements to ceremonial security that had resulted from the incident had been implemented without compromising the traditional appearance and dignity of ceremonial positions. Enhanced communication systems, improved surveillance capabilities, and better coordination with security forces had all been achieved while maintaining the historical integrity that made these positions meaningful to the public. Marcus's family had adjusted well to the changed circumstances resulting from his brief period of fame. Sarah had returned to her normal routine as the media attention subsided, though she remained more aware of security considerations than she had been before the incident. Her pride in Marcus's actions had never diminished, but she was grateful that life had returned to something approaching normalcy. Emma, now 9 years old, had developed a deeper understanding of her father's military service and took even greater pride in his role as a Royal Guard. Her school friends had stopped asking about the incident, but she maintained a quiet confidence in her father's capabilities that would influence her respect for military service throughout her life. The broader military community had embraced Marcus as a symbol of excellence in ceremonial duties, though he remained uncomfortable with individual recognition. His preference was for the attention to focus on the training and preparation that had enabled his response rather than on his personal actions during the incident. Colonel Morrison had been promoted based partly on his regiment's performance during the incident and his subsequent leadership in developing improved training protocols. He remained Marcus's commanding officer and continued to rely on his experience for training and development initiatives that benefited the entire Royal Guards Regiment. The incident had also influenced military recruitment, as young people who had seen the footage of Marcus's response were inspired to pursue military careers. Recruitment offices reported increased interest in ceremonial guard positions from applicants who understood the genuine military skills required for such roles. Military training facilities had expanded their programs to include more comprehensive preparation for the psychological demands of ceremonial duties. The unique challenges of maintaining combat readiness while appearing passive had been recognized as requiring specialized training that went beyond traditional military education. The international military cooperation that had resulted from the incident continued to evolve, with exchange programs and joint training initiatives that shared best practices for ceremonial security throughout NATO and Commonwealth countries. Marcus's experience had become a foundation for enhanced collaboration between military forces facing similar challenges. Public education about military ceremonial roles had been transformed by the incident, with schools and educational institutions using it to teach students about the difference between symbolic and substantive military functions. The lesson that appearances could be deceiving had resonated far beyond military contexts, influencing how people thought about various professions and institutions. Tourism to Buckingham Palace had actually increased following the incident, as people were drawn to see the guards they now understood were genuinely capable soldiers rather than mere tourist attractions. The enhanced respect and understanding had improved the experience for both tourists and guards, creating a more meaningful interaction between the public and military personnel. Marcus continued to serve with the same dedication and professionalism he had always shown, though the experience had confirmed his belief in the importance of constant preparation and training. His 60 seconds of action had been the result of 15 years of military service and countless hours of training, demonstrating that excellence in any field requires sustained commitment to professional development. The lessons learned from his experience would continue to influence military training and security protocols for years to come. His response to 3 criminals' miscalculation had become a permanent part of military education, ensuring that future soldiers would benefit from the knowledge gained during those crucial 60 seconds outside Buckingham Palace. The incident had proven that respect for military service and ceremonial traditions was not merely symbolic, but was based on genuine recognition of the capabilities and dedication required for such roles. Marcus's actions had honored both his training and the institution he served, demonstrating why certain uniforms command respect that goes far deeper than pageantry and tradition. In the end, 3 criminals' attempt to exploit what they perceived as a vulnerability had instead revealed the true strength of institutions they had completely misunderstood. Their 60 seconds of miscalculation had been answered by 60 seconds of professional excellence that would be remembered and studied long after their names were forgotten. The lesson was clear. Respect is earned through capability, dedication, and the willingness to stand guard over the values and traditions that define civilized society, regardless of how peaceful the circumstances might appear.